Have you ever had the realization that you're the common denominator in your own exhaustion? I know for me that's not a fun discovery. And I don't mean like the kind of exhaustion from work. I mean the kind where you're competent and you're capable, you're responsible, you keep showing up, you're doing all the things, and you still feel vaguely erased. It took me decades to wake up to what was actually happening. I didn't realize how many ways that I was leaving myself until in midlife, after way too many exhausted days, too many disappointments, too many repeated patterns. You know, you don't wake up one day and think, this isn't normal. For me, it was a slow burn until one day it wasn't. And that's when shift happens. When I pivoted my consulting career into life coaching and then into trauma-informed care, I started studying nervous systems, and I couldn't ignore my own life inside the coursework. The quiet ways and sometimes not so quiet ways I had been abandoning myself. Not dramatically, socially acceptably actually, demurely even, and of course very politely, because after all, that is what we Canadians do best. Overriding discomfort, intuition, the tension. You know, this isn't a reinvention glow-up video. This is about 10 small shifts that changed how I move through my life. Not because I mastered them, but because I am still learning them. And what surprised me is how small they actually were, but how much they changed the way I experience my days. And if you're watching this thinking, I haven't thought about any of this, you're not behind. There was a version of me that hadn't either, because life unfolds in layers, and you may not need all 10. And right now, you may just need one of them. And sometimes, here's the catch, it's often not the one you expect. The first thing I did was I stopped white-knuckling what I was tolerating. I was never easygoing, and if I ever suggested that I was, both my brother and my kids would call me out on that, and someone would yell liar. I was tightly wound, enduring things with gritted teeth, calling it strength, telling myself that I was the problem for feeling uncomfortable. I grew up being told I was too much, too intense, too sensitive, too loud, too curious, too independent. So I learned to contain myself, sometimes quite literally. I spent hours on the floor in my bedroom closet reading books, living inside other people's fictional lives, because it felt safer than taking up space in my own. That pattern followed me into adulthood. If something felt off, I assumed I was overreacting. But now, when I feel that braced tension in my body, I don't automatically override it. I ask, what am I tolerating? And why do I think I have to? The tension is information. So if your body reacted to that as I said it, you can just let that register and come back to it when you have a quiet moment later. Number 2, I named a few non-negotiables, not a dramatic manifesto, just a few basic anchors: respect, honesty, fairness, and human dignity. I have always had a strong internal radar for inequity. I feel it in my body before I can even explain it. Injustice is often felt before it can be articulated. Sometimes your body registers something before your thoughts actually catch up. For a long time, I thought That intensity meant that I was overreacting, but now I understand it as a value signal. Non-negotiables aren't about controlling other people. They're about staying aligned with what I know in my bones. Number 3, I stopped arguing with my intuition. For years, I had labeled it anxiety, overthinking, being too sensitive. Now I recognize it. It's pattern recognition. My nervous system notices things before my logic catches up. I don't blindly obey it, but I don't silence it anymore. That alone changed how I move through rooms. Number 4, I got curious about the stories I was repeating about myself. I'm too much. I should tone it down. I need to be easier. Those stories started early. And when you carry a story long enough, it stops feeling like a story. It feels like identity. Curiosity gave me the distance. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me, I started asking, who taught me that? That question loosened things. And if you're recognizing one of your own patterns in this, you're welcome to name it down below in the comments. And if that feels like a bit too much, you can just notice it quietly, because that counts too. And before we go further, this is a part I almost missed, because none of this looked very dramatic. It all looked kind of normal, responsible, even admirable. And that's what made them harder to see. Number 5, I reduced comparisons. Comparison used to spike my nervous system instantly. Other people's timelines, other people's platforms, other people's certainty. I would measure myself and come up short. I remember watching expat videos, beautiful lives, younger couples. Everything looked effortless, and quietly wondered, where do I fit in that story? It felt like trying to wear someone else's timeline as a coat that never quite fit. Now I ask a regulating question instead. Does this fit me? Not, is this impressive? Not, does this look good? Instead, does this align with my capacity, with my season of life, with my nervous system? Alignment steadies me more than admiration ever did. Number 6, I stopped trying to control outcomes to feel safe. Control can look responsible. It can look organized, and it can even look competent. But often it was fear holding a clipboard and a Sharpie. I remember a moment walking away from a renovation project that I had invested so much in. On paper, it looked like abject failure, but in my body, it felt like survival. I had been gripping onto something that was already asking to be released, like holding onto a rope that was burning my hands. But life does not cooperate with our need to control. So now I practice something objectively harder. Can I regulate myself when I don't control the outcomes? That's real strength right there. Number 7, I redefined selfish. There was a time I believed choosing myself meant harming someone else. I learned early that love looked like solving things, fixing things, rescuing people. Rescue was the language that I became very fluent in. I got very good at it, but I rarely stopped to ask what it was costing me. Now I see the word stewardship instead of selfishness. If I abandon myself, I will eventually resent you, and resentment erodes connection faster than boundaries ever will. Choosing myself appropriately is not betrayal, it's sustainability. Number 8, I loosened my grip on perfection. Perfectionism once felt protective. If I did everything flawlessly, no one would have a reason to criticize me. But that's not how humans work. I had built an entire identity around getting everything right. From the outside, everything looked calm and capable, but underneath it felt like that image of the duck gliding across the water while paddling furiously underneath the surface. Perfectionism kept me tense, scanning, performing, and admittedly sometimes very, very frozen with fear to get even a tiny thing wrong. Imperfect doesn't mean broken. It means unfinished, still becoming, and honestly, that realization has probably been one of the most regulating things. Number 9, I stopped waiting to feel certain. I thought clarity would arrive first. It didn't. Capacity came first. I kept waiting for that moment when everything would feel clear, especially around my move to France. But clarity didn't arrive like a green light. It felt more like a quiet knowing that eventually I couldn't ignore, less like a plan and more like a pull. Small risks, low stakes exposure, stretching without flooding. Confidence followed experience, not the other way around. Certainty is kind of overrated. Capacity is trainable, and we'll talk more about that next week. Number 10, I practice sitting with the discomfort before I respond, and this one does humble me regularly. The other day in a group chat I care very deeply about, I felt that familiar surge. I had put energy into something, building a steady and supportive community, months of building this awesome community vibe and helping people advance their training skills. And then a rogue commenter, most likely with an unconscious agenda, jumped in and bigfooted all over the conversation, totally deflating the vibe that had taken months to build. I can't ascribe to their motives, but I can tell you that my body reacted before my brain caught up. Heat, tightness. If you know that feeling, that's your system responding in real time. A strong urge to correct immediately, because when something feels unjust, my nervous system lights up fast. I used to respond quickly to restore my integrity, but now I try to pause, to take a beat, to not silence myself and not to make myself feel smaller, but to let the activation settle so that my response comes from a place of steadiness and not from the surge. Integrity doesn't require immediacy. It requires being regulated. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one that waits until your nervous system catches up. Sometimes I get that right, and I have to admit, sometimes I don't. And if that's where you are too, you're not behind, because even noticing that surge is growth. You know, these patterns don't just disappear. You don't outgrow them like childhood shoes. You end up growing around them. You become more resourceful inside them, more resilient with them, and more regulated when they flare. And over time, the noticing softens their grip. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough that they don't run the whole show the way that they used to. They'll still show up sometimes at most inconvenient moments when you're tired, when something really, really matters. It's like a tap on the shoulder or a sudden surge that feels way too familiar. And when that happens, that noticing is the pivotal part. And that is a part that I least expected, because I found that noticing is where the shift happens. If you're watching this and thinking, I haven't done any of that, you are not late. There was a time I hadn't questioned any of it either. Life isn't a destination where you finally arrive healed. It's a process of returning to yourself again and again and again. Resourceful, resilient, regulated, and still becoming. If one of these shifts resonated, you're welcome to share which one down below. And if you're just beginning to notice your own patterns, you can simply say, I'm noticing. That more than counts. And if this conversation feels like your speed, you're very welcome to subscribe and keep walking with us. And if you'd like to understand a little more of how I got here, there's a video here that holds part of that story. You're welcome to go there next. Ralph and I will see you next week, one regulated step at a time. À la prochaine fois. À bientôt, mes amis.